Let's do a little bit of scaffolding before our next problem. So, first of all, sine inverse, cosine inverse, and tangent inverse. Let's just remember, what quadrants are we allowed to look in for these? Sine inverse is quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. Remember, the answers are negative out of quadrant 4. Cosine inverse, we're allowed to look in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. And tangent inverse, we're allowed to look in quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. The answers are going to be negative coming out of the quadrant 4 quadrant 4 answers. All right, let's look at an old question. Now, they're telling us that our angle theta is between 0 and pi over 2. That means that we know it is in quadrant 1. And what do we know about our angle theta? Well, cosine adjacent over hypotenuse is 3 over 5. So the adjacent side is 3, the hypotenuse is 5, and if we use the Pythagorean theorem, we will get that this opposite side is then a 4. So now, what is it asking us to find? It says if cosine of theta is 3 over 5, and we know that this represents the angle theta, well, what is the cotangent of theta going to equal? Well, we'll begin by finding the tangent of theta. TOA, opposite over adjacent, is 4 over 3. So then cotangent of theta must be 3 over 4. Now we've done several versions of this question where we had to draw the triangles in certain quadrants, and this is just a particular one that we did from the last 2 units is when we saw it. Now let's look at something very similar. This is asking us to find the cotangent of the cosine inverse of 3/5. Now first, let's think about cosine inverse of 3/5. Remember, what do we plug into a cosine inverse? This is a number between -1 and 1. And what is the answer that would come out if we plugged this into a calculator? Well, we would get some angle. We don't know what that angle is, so let's call it a theta. But what do we know about this angle theta that came out? Well, there's only one thing that we know about it. We know that cosine of that angle theta is adjacent over hypotenuse 3/5. Can I use this information to build myself a triangle? Well, yeah, I can. The first thing I need to know is what quadrant am I in? Well, I plugged a positive number into a cosine inverse. What kind of angle is going to come out? Remember, cosine inverse answers are going to come from quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. Since this is a positive number we plugged into cosine inverse, that means that the angle theta must be in quadrant 1. If it was a negative number in our cosine inverse, then it would have had to come from quadrant 2. What else do I know? We know the adjacent is 3, and we know the hypotenuse is 5. Does this look familiar? Did we just do this? I think we did. So let's use Pythagorean theorem, and we'll get that this opposite angle over here is 4. What was the original question asking us to do? It's asking us to find the cotangent of the cosine inverse of this 3/5. Well, didn't we just say that cosine inverse is equal to this angle theta? So doesn't that mean that we really want to find the cotangent of this angle theta on the triangle that we just drew? Well, tangent is opposite over adjacent, so cotangent must be adjacent over opposite, or 3/4. And isn't that exactly the problem that we just did before? It is. So we've seen these problems before. The difference now is that you need to use your clues from the trig inverses to decide what quadrant do we draw a triangle in, label all the sides, watch your pluses and minuses, and then answer the next question.